Today we look into Balin's Moria expedition and the hunt for Gollum and the One Ring. In the last video we discussed the events of The Hobbit and the actions of the White Council in parallel, but also what I called the transformation of Aragorn, where he learned his true identity and met Arwen, and then became Thranduil, going on his great journeys in Rohan and Gondor to become Aragorn again. My name is Chris, aka the Philosopher's Games, and before we start, a few hints. This video is still part of my Who's Elrond series, but is also perfectly understandable if you have not seen the other 11 parts yet. I try to pronounce names as Tolkien described it, which means there will be trilled R's. Shoutouts to the artists who allowed me to use their fantastic artworks like Kimberly80, Sarah Morello, Ted Naismith, Jenny Dolphin, and all the others. Thank you. And spoiler warning. As you see, Third Age 2980 was a year where a lot of things happened in Middle-earth. Saruman's treachery also became slowly more apparent. As mentioned in the last section, he started to create his orc armies around Third Age 2990. In parallel, also other things happened. A year earlier, Third Age 2989, Balin started a new adventure and planned to retake Moria. In the book, he was the second oldest dwarf in the quest of Erebor. Only Thorin was older, and 2989 he's already about 226 years old. It's interesting that Balin, one of the oldest dwarfs, started such an expedition and not one of the younger ones, though we know that Ori and Oin also came with him on this expedition. For Balin, Tolkien also explicitly mentioned that he and Gandalf visited Bilbo in the Shire Third Age 2949, so Balin seems to enjoy traveling and going on an adventure. Glóin said in the Council of Elrond chapter, "At last, however, Balin listened to the whispers and resolved to go, and though Dóin did not give leave willingly, he took with him Ori and Oin and many of our folk, and they went away south." The fear of Durin's bane was still there, but the dwarfs from the House of the Longbeards in Erebor started speaking of Moria again, though with dread. I assume this is what Tolkien means with whispers. Nobody wanted to go there. There were no open talks. Maybe people were also not speaking loud when they talked about it. However, Balin went there and was successful and established his colony, becoming the Lord of Moria. He set up his seat in the Chamber of Nazagûl, the Chamber of Records. We can read further. For a while, we had news and it seemed good. Messages reported that Moria had been entered and a great work begun there. They even found Durin's axe, an ancient heirloom of the House of Durin, but also true silver, that is mithril. Also, Third Age 2989, Bilbo asked Frodo to live with him in Bagant and become his heir. Tolkien funnily writes, and the hopes of the Sackville Bagganses were finally dashed. With an heir in place, they would not get Bagant. Third Age 2991, Eomer, Eomund's son, was born in Rohan. At some point, the messages to Erebor must have stopped. I assume Third Age 2994 at the latest. Over the first few years, Balin and his company started having more and more trouble with the orcs, and during all these years also some companions died, like Floi, in the first year I assume. 2994, so in year 5 of the expedition, Balin went alone to the Mirror Mere outside the east gate of Moria and was killed by an orc arrow shot from behind a stone. The orc was slain by others, I assume when they found Balin, but then more orcs came and a fight broke out that drove the dwarfs back into Moria, where they barred the gate of their refuge. It seems they took Balin's corpse with them and laid him to rest in the grave inside the chamber of Nazagûl. In this time, Oin took a small party and moved towards the west gate, searching for an escape, but there Oin was taken by the Watcher in the water, and the 4 surviving party members fled back to the others and reported what happened. All events of those 5 years were written in the Book of Nazagûl by different authors, but the last pages were written by Ori, who interestingly used an Elvish script to write. Gimli comments on this. He, Ori, would write well and speedily and often used the Elvish characters. The surviving dwarves had their last stand in the chamber of Nazagûl against the orcs, and Ori recorded their last moments in the book. They were all slain. We know the famous last words. We cannot get out. The end comes, and then drums in the deep. The Fellowship of the Ring will find the chamber and the book about 25 years later. Gimli wanted to take the book back to King Dóin in Erebor, but it is not recorded if he succeeded with it during his journey. The next year, Third Age 2995, Eomer's sister Éowyn was born. Now we get close to the events of the Lord of the Rings. Third Age 3000, we can read in Appendix B that Saruman dared to use the Palantir in Orthanc. Here we also learn that Sauron used the Palantir that was once stored in Minas Ithil, now known as Minas Morgul. Saruman becomes a traitor to the council, and from his spies around the Shire he learned that the Shire is closely guarded by the Dúnedain Rangers of the North, so Aragorn's people. As mentioned, Third Age 2953, after the last White Council, Saruman places some spies around the Shire. On an unrelated note, it's also hard to tell when the people in Eriador started calling Aragorn Strider, but at the latest in this time, probably much earlier. Tolkien writes that the Shadow of Mordor lengthened, so Mordor's reach increased. For example, they got more allies, and especially with Saruman, a very powerful one. But it's still a shadow, so still secret and hard to detect. At the same time, the power and resistance of Sauron's enemies decreased, like with the elves leaving Middle-earth. Quote, "Elves who seldom walked in the Shire could now be seen passing westward through the woods in the evening, passing and not returning, but they were leaving Middle-earth and were no longer concerned with its troubles." But some other folks also fled from the east to the west, like dwarves, which indicates that Sauron's activities in the east had a huge impact on the safety of these regions. Quote, "There were, however, dwarves on the road in unusual numbers. Frodo often met strange dwarves of far countries seeking refuge in the west. They were troubled, and some spoke in whispers of the enemy and of the land of Mordor." Meanwhile, in the Shire, Bilbo starts the preparation for his 111th or 111st birthday party and orders some gifts for his guests in Dale and the mountain, so Erebor. We also learn in the chapter A Conspiracy Unmasked that a year before Bilbo's birthday party, Merry saw Bilbo using the One Ring to avoid the Sackville Bagginses. Since that point, he was quite curious. And then, Third Age 3001, The Lord of the Rings begins with the chapter A Long-Expected Party. We know the story in and out, so I won't cover every detail of The Lord of the Rings. Bilbo celebrated his 111th birthday, used the One Ring to disappear, and left the Shire to go to Rivendell. In the book, Gandalf added a flash to Bilbo's disappearance and took the blame for it to distract from the use of a potential magical ring. If the word and rumor would spread and the enemy learned that somebody just disappeared in front of hundreds of people, they could come to conclusions. This way the rumor would be that the wizard Gandalf made him disappear. Afterwards, Gandalf talked to Bilbo, who left with 3 companions, I assume dwarves. It was remarkable that with Gandalf's help, Bilbo was able to let go willingly of the One Ring, a feat unheard of at this point. Then the wizard met Frodo in Backend, who inherited the One Ring, which was in an envelope on the mantelpiece. With this, Mithrandir had many things to find out and would leave the Shire for 3 years. We can also read in Appendix B that Gandalf doubled the guard around the Shire, so I assume he contacted the Rangers of Aragorn and asked for reinforcements. Also, Gandalf knew that only Gollum could provide information, and if the enemy found Gollum first, it could lead to disaster. Gollum knew Bilbo's name, so Gandalf had to find him first and sought for news about him. For that, he also talked to Aragorn to help him, and so the hunt for Gollum began. Both Sauron and Gandalf were eager to find him, though Sauron probably didn't know Gollum yet. You could argue that this was an advantage for Gandalf and his allies, but Sauron also had one advantage. Gollum possessed the One Ring for 478 years, poisoning his mind. All he had to do was drawing all the evil creatures to Mordor with his will, and they would come at some point. In the chapter The Shadow of the Past we can read, "And the dark power was bending all its will to gather them there. The ring of the enemy would leave its mark too, leave him open to the summons." We already noticed a glimpse of this. For example, 3rd Age 2951, quote, "Sauron declares himself openly and gathers power in Mordor. He begins the rebuilding of Barad-dûr. Gollum turns towards Mordor." Gollum seemed to not fully enter Mordor yet, but at some point he would. Sauron would pull on the strings of his evil puppets, and they would each time get closer and closer to him, and sooner or later be trapped in his grasp. About 3rd Age 2980, the year where so many things happened, we can read in Appendix B, about this time Gollum reaches the confines of Mordor and becomes acquainted with Shelob. So here, in this time, Gollum made a deal with Shelob and got access to Mordor this way. He would not get eaten and become her ally, luring new prey into her webs, and Shelob would help Gollum with his revenge. We also know from The Hobbit that Gollum only knew Bilbo's name. He went as far as Dale to learn more about Bilbo, like where he was from. Quote from the chapter The Shadow of the Past. "I gathered that his padding feet had taken him at last to Esgaroth, Lake Town, and even to the streets of Dale, listening secretly and peering. After the impressions Bilbo left there regarding the events of The Hobbit, he was a hero and everybody knew Bilbo Baggins from the Shire, so it was easy for Gollum to gather that piece of information." However, we jump back to where we were. Bilbo reached Rivendell 3rd Age 3002 and became a guest of Elrond, settling in Rivendell. Bilbo helped greatly in the quest of Erebor and was a major factor for its success. As a result, Elrond would of course let Bilbo live there. Tragically, in the same year, Eomund was chasing orc raiders to the borders of Emyn Muil and was slain in an ambush. We can read, "He was a great lover of horses and hater of orcs. If news came of a raid, he would often ride against them in hot anger, unwarily and with few men." But the tragedy continued because his wife, Theodwyn, the sister of Theoden, was sick and died in the same year as well. Theoden was in great grief, and we can read, "Her children he took into his house, calling them son and daughter. So Eomer and Eowyn, who were 11 and 7 years old." 3rd Age 3004, Gandalf visited Frodo in the Shire, and did so at intervals during the next 4 years, as we can read in Appendix B. So Gandalf basically visited every year. Gilraen left Rivendell some years after 2980, when her son and Arwen plighted their troth. She lived alone among her people, the Dúnedain of the North. We can read, after a few years Gilraen took leave of Elrond. We don't know how her relationship with Elrond was, but she lived in Rivendell for around 50 years, so half her life. She would have left earlier when she would not feel welcome there. She also lived there for a long time without her son, and left when she was in her mid to late 70s. Aragorn visited his mother Gilraen, likely 3rd Age 3006 or 3007. She said the Sindarin words, onen ie stelle dain, uchebine stellanim, to him, which means I gave hope to the Dunedain, I have kept no hope for myself. It was a linot, which is one of the 3 Elvish verse modes. Aragorn left her heavy of heart, and soon after, before the next spring, she died. 3rd Age 3007. She was 100 years old. Aragorn, or Estelle, was the hope she gave her people, but she would not live long enough to see this come to pass, and even Aragorn said once to Arwen, "How it may come to pass is hidden from me." In the same year, King Bain, son of Bard, dies, and his son Brand becomes king in Dale. 3rd Age 3009. Gandalf and Aragorn renewed their hunt for Gollum. We can read at intervals during the next 8 years searching in the vales of Anduin, Mirkwood and Rhovanion to the confines of Mordor. But they could not find him. But at some point during these years, Gollum himself entered Mordor. Maybe the pull of Sauron was finally strong enough. And here he was captured by Sauron's servants, I assume orcs. If we read the Shadow of the Past closely, it seems Gollum learned things in Mordor and was leaving again. And around the borders of it, he was spotted and captured, quote, and sooner or later, as he lurked and pried on the borders, he would be caught. With this, Sauron won the hunt for Gollum, and this set things into motion. Also, there seems to be a mistake in this entry of Appendix B, because in the older versions of Lord of the Rings, you also find the entry for 3rd Age 3009. Elrond sends for Arwen, and she returns to Imladris. The mountains and all lands eastward are becoming dangerous. But it seems this entry belongs to the year 3016, and this is corrected in the newer editions of Lord of the Rings. I think that came after 2015. However, Sauron took Gollum to Barad-dûr, according to Unfinished Tales, and questioned and tormented Gollum there to get the information he needed, which was the name Bilbo Baggins, and that he is from the Shire, which, as mentioned, Gollum found out on his travels. Interestingly, Sauron did not kill Gollum afterwards. We can read in Unfinished Tales, he, Sauron, did not trust Gollum, for he divined something indomitable in him, which could not be overcome, even by the shadow of fear, except by destroying him. But Sauron perceived the depths of Gollum's malice towards those that had robbed him, and guessing that he would go in search of them to avenge himself, Sauron hoped that his spies would thus be led to the ring. He was not wrong with this. Though Gollum claimed later to Frodo that he escaped from Sauron all by himself, others assumed Sauron let him go. The Unfinished Tales text, chapter The Hunt for the Ring, clearly states this, quote, "When he, Sauron, had learned what he could from him, Sauron released him and sent him forth again." And even Frodo assumes the escape may have been allowed or arranged and well known in the Dark Tower, which is later actually confirmed by the orc Shagrad when Sam in secret listened to the orcs in Ciris Ungol, quote, "And we had word from high up to let him pass." We don't know when Gollum was captured exactly. It was between 3rd Age 3009 and 3017, but he was released 3rd Age 3017. 3rd Age 3010. Prince Adrahil dies in Dol Amroth, and his son Imrahil becomes the next prince of Dol Amroth. 3rd Age 3014. According to Unfinished Tales, King Theoden becomes ill. Due to this, Grima Wormtongue, son of Galmod, got quite a bit of influence over Theoden. The king's son Theodred and Eomer tried to counter this, and Saruman knew that those two were the main obstacles he needed to overcome to conquer Rohan. Grima tried his best to play them one against the other, as we can read in Unfinished Tales, and portray Eomer as to ever being eager to increase his own authority and to act without consulting the king or his heir. We can also assume that Grima was also responsible for the king's failing health, quote, "but it may well have been induced or increased by subtle poisons administered by Grima." Now would follow the correction of the mentioned mistake. Third Age 3016. Elrond sends for Arwen and she returns to Imladris. The mountains and all lands eastward are becoming dangerous. This entry was by mistake in the older editions of the Lord of the Rings book placed for the Third Age 3009 entry. For the newer editions it was moved to 3016. Same with adding the entry for Third Age 2952 that was not there in the old editions. And now Third Age 3017, unfortunately for Gollum, who just escaped imprisonment in the hellhole of Mordor, was captured again by Aragorn in the Dead Marshes. They would not become friends, and we can read that he was covered in green slime and bit Aragorn, who brought him to King Thranduil. You could ask, why to Thranduil? He was still relatively close among the allies, though still far away from Mordor, and as Aragorn explains in the Council of Elrond, I brought him there at last and gave him to the elves, for we had agreed that this should be done. A problem I encountered was composing a chronology of these events. In Unfinished Tales, we get the months and days in which things happen, but they don't align perfectly, at least if Gollum is captured by Aragorn in Third Age 3017, as described in Appendix B, and there in February, as we learn from Unfinished Tales. February would work for Gollum being captured 3018, but 3017, a hasty Gandalf would need over a year to reach the Shire from Thranduil. So I decided to leave out the months for the exact chronology here and pretend Aragorn captured Gollum at the end of 3017, else the chronology does not make sense. It's astounding that Aragorn managed to bring Gollum this far alone without Gollum escaping. That are about 686 miles or 1097 kilometers. In Unfinished Tales we learn that he took a specific path to avoid detection as good as possible and that he traveled almost 900 miles, even crossing the river Anduin by binding Gollum to a log and swimming to the other side with it, and later the Beornings helped him crossing it again. He described that he had to watch him day and night and make him walk before him. There's a reason Gandalf calls him the greatest traveler and huntsman of this age of the world. We can even read in The Shadow of the Past that Gandalf had already given up to find Gollum, and in the Council of Elrond also Aragorn was giving up his search and was on his way home, when he spotted fresh trails of soft feet beside a muddy pool that led away from Mordor. Just sneaking around the borders of Mordor as heir of Isildur, all by himself, shows how fearless and skilled Aragorn must have been. We can also read that Gollum watched into one of the pools in the Dead Marshes when Aragorn found and captured him. And he was covered in green slime, so maybe similar to Frodo, he was almost lured into a pool and was kind of saved by Aragorn there. This would also explain why he can warn Frodo later. When Aragorn brought him to Thranduil, Gandalf was in Minas Tirith researching the words of Isildur, as he would later explain in the Council of Elrond. On his way northward, he received messages from LotR that Aragorn found Gollum, and Gandalf went there immediately. It's not known how these messages were delivered, maybe by messengers who scouted the main roads for him, or through some birds, or by the telepathic concept of Osanwe, though long-range Osanwe always opens a ton of story problems. Another possibility would be that Gandalf simply passed LotR riding north. He could have later also passed Rivendell, bringing the news to Elrond as well. Interestingly, in Unfinished Tales, when Sauron learned of Gollum's capture, he was worried, quote, "Now Sauron, learning of the capture of Gollum by the chiefs of his enemies, was in great haste and fear. He knew that his enemies would now also know what he knew, so whoever would find Bilbo Baggins and the Shire first would win the One Ring. What Sauron didn't know, All his enemies already knew where the Shire was. He was the only one who didn't know, and so he sent his Nazgûl to find out. It's fascinating how the knowledge was so different among the three factions. Saruman knew where the Shire was and all about the lore of the One Ring, but not what happened with it after Isildur's death. So he did not know who got the ring and where the ring was, though he could have guessed that the Shire might have to do with it. Sauron knew who had the One Ring after Gollum and the name of the area where that person lived, but not where that area was. And Gandalf knew the person who had the One Ring, its exact location, but neither the full lore yet, nor that it really was the One Ring. But he will find out very soon and also learn what Sauron knew. When Gandalf arrived in Thranduil's realm, he questioned Gollum, even putting the fear of fire on him, and tried bit by bit to piece the puzzle together with what he learned. The detail of the fear of fire is interesting. If Sauron would do that, nobody would be surprised, but Gandalf? That's surprising, but also shows how much he needed this information. And now everything was clear to the wizard. He just had to make one final test, which he learned from Isildur's notes, which he studied as mentioned in Minas Tirith. He knew he had to go to the Shire and meet Frodo as soon as possible. As mentioned, him leaving Thranduil must have happened 3rd Age 3018, else he would have needed a year to reach the Shire at the 12th of April 3018, as described in Appendix B. A man bringing Gollum to Thranduil was potentially slightly noted by some of Sauron's spies in Mirkwood, though it seems not investigated with haste. But when Gandalf went there as well and Sauron's spies reported back, the Dark Lord knew that his enemy had captured Gollum. In parallel, Eomer becomes a marshal of Rohan in 3rd Age 3017 and was given his father's charge in the East Marches. In Mordor, Sauron knew he had to act now and decided to attack Osgiliath on the 20th of June. According to Unfinished Tales, he wanted to distract his enemies, also testing their strengths, so that his Nazgûl could cross the Anduin there mostly unnoticed, and their presence would be perceived as part of Sauron's war effort, and start searching for the Shire and Baggins. The Nazgûl had a strong presence of terror around them and are not ideal for secret missions as a result. We can read that Boromir, while defending his foothold in Osgiliath, noticed the presence of the Witch King. Quote, "A power was there we have not felt before." The texts hint at the Nazgûl also assisting a bit in combat. At the same time, Sauron sends some orcs to Thranduil's realm and attack it to free or even, in a worst-case scenario, kill Gollum. The elves, according to Legolas, treated Gollum very well, though it was not certain that Gollum could be fully cured from what the ring did to his mind. They let Gollum walk through the woods with guards when the weather was good and let him climb trees. He even had a favorite one, which was very high, and he climbed up to feel the free wind. One day he would not come down, and so the guards waited long into the night for him. Orcs then attacked parts of the realm of Thranduil, and the elves could defend the attack. But, quote, "When the battle was over, we found that Gollum was gone, and his guards were slain or taken." The attack was too coordinated, and the elves speculated that Gollum knew the attack was coming. Quote, "How that was contrived we cannot guess, but Gollum is cunning, and the spies of the enemy are many." The elves followed the attacker's trail, but it led into the direction of Dol Guldur, where they would not follow further. Quote, "We came on his trail among those of many orcs, and it plunged deep into the forest, going south. I think his trail among those of many orcs indicates that he went with those for a while, maybe. And from here, close to Dol Guldur, I assume, Gollum must have also escaped the orcs, it seems. Quote, "All trace of Gollum is lost. It is thought that about this time being hunted both by the elves and Sauron's servants, he took refuge in Moria, but when he had at last discovered the way to the West Gate, he could not get out. Interestingly, both Gandalf, when he searched for Thorin's father, and Aragorn, I could not find out when exactly, went through Moria once in their lives already, but they for sure knew how to get through the West Gate. Oin and Gollum had less luck with that way. And so Gollum escaped the elves and Sauron and went through Moria as far as the West Gate and was trapped in the darkness of Moria until one day the door might open. And with the attack of Osgiliath and Thranduil, the War of the Ring begins. Thank you for watching. I hope you liked the video. If so, feel free to press the like button, leave a comment, subscribe and recommend me further. Maybe check out my games channel as well, which just reached 1000 subscribers a few days ago. Thank you so much for your support and huge shoutouts to all my supporters who support me on all the different ways. Small channel update here. There will be a dedicated video at some point, but this way I reach most people, I think. You may have noticed that my last lore video, which was an hour long, did not perform too well. I know I have not uploaded in quite some time, but for years now it feels like my channel here is absolutely cursed when it comes to getting my videos recommended to people who might enjoy deep dives into Tolkien's lore. I already struggled with this even when I uploaded a lot some years ago. I think many of my subscribers aren't even notified when I upload a video. And this year it's especially bad, though livestream view numbers are still good, interestingly. First, from now on there will be a Patreon page, which I already set up, and in the description you find the link and also a tip jar link as well, though it uses Streamlabs, which is mainly for Twitch, so it's not ideal. The other YouTube ways, like paid channel memberships, super chat, super thanks, etc., are still there as well. Second, I seriously think about moving to a completely new YouTube channel for lore content only, even re-releasing some old videos there, and I will experiment a bit with this in the future. I need 1000 subscribers there and 4000 watched hours, but the subscribers will be the most difficult part. The transfer to the new channel would be a slow process over time. I link the new channel in the description and here on screen if possible. It will be called TPhLore if possible, which is currently the name of the German lore channel, which I will rename in TPhLoreDE, but the name switch takes 2 weeks, I think, so the new channel is still called TPhLoreEN. I know it's complicated. I already prepared it, but the step is quite scary and also feels wrong, but maybe I can escape the randomness with it, the curse. A lot of information here at the end, but your help and feedback would be appreciated. If this video here does exceptionally well, I might not commit to moving, I think, but currently my confidence in this channel working as it should is almost non-existent, and I just have to change something. Again, thank you people for watching, and goodbye.